What's up, guys? It's Alex from Action Charge. Welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, welcome. Today we are finally getting around to part 3 of discussing why the Ebycco got such a smaller range than the Ecells King's Crown. And by the way, if you guys notice this giant stick hanging out, that is my 360 camera, so I can pick up some cool angles. Today we are on the modded goat bike with the modded headlight from the guys over at Spark Cycle Works. They threw on a motorcycle headlight, and look at this, I have turn signals left and right. Nice. And I have a horn.
I have a chair.
Links to all that stuff in the description below, and they did also give me this sweet looking jacket. It's called like amp heads or something. And for now, we're gonna veer off to this little trail because I want to talk to you guys about the range test findings. So, and by the way, I do have my notes open so I don't miss anything. So before I get to the main part of what I want to say, believe it or not, I'm still going to recommend the Ebycco EB10. And I'll tell you why at the end. So if you guys noticed in the video, the Ecells with the 50S celled batteries performed very well. Even though it was advertised to only have an extra 3 amp hours of battery, and the bike overall is actually way heavier, and the King's Crown also has higher amperage controllers than the EB10, so it's using up more power. Why did it perform way better than the EB10? Well, there's 2 main reasons. Number 1, it does have the better battery cells, which simply perform better. They stay cooler when under load, and they end up running way more efficiently. And overall, they just have better performance. But the main reason why the EB10 did not perform nearly as well as the King's Crown is because of what I discovered when I took apart the battery of the EB10. I counted 70 battery cells, and each cell was labeled to be 5 amp hours. And based on those numbers, the math would make you believe that the battery is actually a 25 amp hour pack, not the advertised 32 amp hour pack. And by the way, if you guys ever do become e-bike YouTubers or YouTubers at all talking about products, you have to be careful on how you say things. Instead of saying this is something, you really should be saying this is advertised to have X, Y, and Z, unless you can verify it yourself. In this case, you guys can see the cell count from this picture. It's 70 cells. And the math would make it seem that it's a 25 amp hour battery. It's not 32 amp hours, which again is way off from the advertised specs. So now you guys are probably thinking, how could this be? How could they do this? How could Ebycco do this?
But you can't do this to me.
Well, believe it or not, it might even not be their fault. They might not even know about this. But regardless, someone is trying to pull over a fast one, either on the customer or on Ebycco.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Because see, bike companies, they get their batteries from battery suppliers, right? Someone else builds the actual packs for these e-bikes, and they throw a label on them, and off they go to the e-bike company. And a lot of the times the e-bike company just assumes that the battery is to the specifications of what they ordered. Sometimes the battery manufacturer tries to pull a fast one over on the e-bike company, and I've heard stories of good cells surrounding the bad cells inside a pack. So let's say you even do take apart this battery pack, you'll look at the cells on the outside and you'll think, oh wow, these are good cells. But inside, all the cells are generic cells. They're different to try and save money. I've even heard stories where the battery pack itself will have the cells required to achieve a specific voltage, but instead of having enough of those cells in parallel to get the capacity you need, they would just add a small sandbag to make the battery pack weigh enough so that it feels as if it's full of battery cells, but in reality, it just has a sandbag in half the pack. So sometimes these e-bike companies, they don't even know what they're getting. Oh, and it gets even worse. I've even heard stories of places that sell battery cells putting a new label on each cell, making the battery pack manufacturer think they're getting a certain cell, but they're actually getting a cheap generic cell wrapped in the wrapper of an expensive cell. It's crazy. So there's 3 potential places of lying and deception that could happen when it comes to these batteries. And what's frustrating is that you as a consumer aren't expected or even encouraged to take apart and test these batteries, because what are you gonna do? Take apart a battery? No, that's dangerous. You have to know what you're doing. You could easily short something out and then start a fire. Oh, plus, when you do take apart a battery, that voids your warranty, so there's that also. So getting back to the Ebycco EB10, it's got what seems to be 25 amp hours of battery capacity and generic cells. And the BMS of this battery is a 55 amp BMS. The controller is asking for around the same amount, so it's asking the battery, this 25 amp hour pack with generic cells, for quite a lot of current. And it seems like it's asking for so much current from this pack that the voltage sag was tremendous when you accelerate under full load, so much so that early in that range test ride, the battery bar was dipping down.
There is a good amount of voltage sag in this battery, I will say that. We actually have lost 2 bars just in the span of about 2 miles that I've done so far. And I haven't actually lost that much power from the battery. It's just that the battery sags a lot when you do demand a lot of power from that battery, which this bike does.
Even though I had pretty much just started riding, it was a lot of battery sag. And by the way, batteries will attempt to give you what they can when asked for a certain amount of power, but they're not gonna like it. They're gonna sag down a lot, they're gonna get hot, and hopefully you have a BMS that can sense the temperature of the pack and shut it down before things get too hot. But it's stressing the hell out of the cells, and that will definitely shorten the lifespan of that battery pack. In fact, I think I had so much voltage sag, that's why the whole battery shut down towards the end of my range test.
Oh, there it is. The bike shut off. Let's turn it back on. That's it. No, it's not even turning back on. Turn the battery off, turn it on. No, we're getting nothing. The battery is seemingly lifeless.
It sensed that there was a massive drop in the voltage, and each BMS has a cutoff point for voltage, and when you hit the accelerator, the voltage sagged and it went way down past the cutoff point and the whole battery shut off. And that might not have happened if there were a couple things in place. Number one, better battery cells, or you just use less power to not sag the voltage as much. So for example, the King's Crown had that limp mode, which prevents a huge battery sag because you're just not using all that much power from the battery. So you could probably keep going and get a little bit more range if you wanted to. But the third way you can fix this problem is the reason why I would still recommend this bike is by simply adding more batteries in parallel. Or in this case, just run a second battery pack in parallel, use a battery blender, and you'd be just fine. If you have 2 equal-sized batteries, let's say you get 2 of the same batteries, let's say hypothetically speaking, they're 25 amp hours, each one would only have to give out half of what it originally had to do, which means the battery cells themselves are not being overworked, they'll stay nice and cool, they'll run efficiently. And not only because of the increased efficiency will you get more range, obviously when you have 2 battery packs, double the capacity, so in that case you'll have 50 amp hours, you're gonna get way more range. And I think that bike is almost made to be run with 2 batteries. It would solve all the problems. And I still think the Ebycco EB10 is a great value option. It is such a good price for the amount of power that it gives you. Even with the cost of a second battery, it would still be an amazing price for the amount of performance that you get with that bike.
Go. Whoa, tire spin. Look at this. Wow. Wow. We made it up that hill. I was watching the speedometer. It was showing us like 6 or 8 miles an hour. Wow.
And then you slap on the extra battery and you have a 40 mile an hour long range e-bike now with 50 amp hours. That still costs you way less than some other bikes that don't even give you anything close to the same performance and battery specs. So who knows if Ebycco even knows that there are only 70 cells in the battery pack. They might not even be knowing this. Maybe Ebycco will be watching this video, show this to their battery supplier and say, hey guys, did you know that there's only 70 battery cells in this pack that's being advertised as a 32 amp hour battery? Maybe they don't even know. So again, even after this discovery, I think this bike is still a great option with that second battery fix that I mentioned. It would fix all the battery sag issues and the battery inefficiency issues. And if Ebycco does know about this, Shame on them for e-bike fishing us. Kind of like getting catfished on Tinder. Back in my single days a few years ago, I've gone on dates where the pictures of the girl looked way better than real life, but the real person still looked pretty good, and we still had a great time. It's just kind of frustrating that we can't even believe the numbers that are on the website when it comes to battery specs and even the amount of wattage that you're getting with these bikes. Because remember, this was on top of the discovery that the bike itself did not, in fact, have a 5,000 watt controller as was advertised. It was closer to 3,000 watts, which, by the way, is still insane for a bike that costs less than $1,400. Oh, and by the way, cheap cells that are stressed hard won't even put out good power due to the voltage sag. Since the voltage will sag so much under power, you multiply the sagged voltage by the current of the controller, and that's the power that you're actually getting. So let's say a 52 volt battery is charged up completely, which is gonna end up being somewhere on 58 volts, maybe a little bit higher. If you have a truly high discharge pack, let's say hypothetically speaking, it only sags 2 volts under load, you'll be getting 56 volts, and then multiply that by the current, which let's say is 54 amps, and you'll get 3,024 watts. Now let's say the pack sags around 6 volts. Now you'll actually only be getting 2,700 watts, and most of these packs sag even more than that. And like I mentioned earlier, that is something that would be mostly fixed with 2 batteries ran in parallel. I don't think you'd get a whole lot of voltage sag whatsoever. So here's what I'm thinking of doing to remedy this issue as an e-bike reviewer. First, I'm going to be changing how I word things in my reviews. Instead of saying this bike has X, Y, Z, whatever feature it has, if I cannot verify it, I instead will have to say, just to make sure I'm honest, this bike is advertised to have X, Y, and Z, because I actually don't know the amp hours of a battery unless I take it apart and test it. So that would be a more honest way of reviewing a bike. And I have started doing that for a lot of torque claims, because some of these bikes say ridiculous things when it comes to torque and range on top of that. So usually I'll just say a bike will be advertised to have some torque rating or some range. Secondly, I am looking for a device that can drain the battery at around, let's say, 10 amps from a full charge, and hopefully the device will have a voltage cutoff function where it will cut the voltage off. Otherwise, I have to rely on the BMS of the battery pack to cut off the voltage, and you never want to drain a battery too low. That is dangerous. And hopefully the BMS would work. As you guys saw, the Ebycco one did work because the entire battery shut off. But I'd like to not rely on that if I can help it, and have the machine do it for me instead. But let's say I fully charge the battery pack and then I use this machine to discharge it completely. The machine will measure the true capacity of that battery pack, and then I can tell you guys, here's what I measured for watt hours on this battery. And then you can compare that to whatever the company advertises. So I found a few devices that could be good options for this purpose. I did actually get one from Amazon, like one of the cheaper ones, and it immediately burnt up. It actually burnt up right in front of my face, which freaked me out like crazy, because whenever there's anything burning up in front of you, especially next to the battery, that's Danger City right there. But hopefully I can find something that's better quality that will actually last and not burn up. And the reason it took me so long to make this video is because I was debating on how to record this video. Initially, I wanted to meet up with Kevin from Northeast Battery Systems and do a series of interviews talking about this. But it seems like we're both pretty packed with our schedules, and it's going to be a while till we can actually do that. I think you guys are going to really like that footage. So I figured I'd get this video out of the way because I know some of you guys were interested in the conclusion, this third part of comparing those two bikes and the range test and why the difference in range was so drastic. So that's it for today, folks. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you think of this topic. Pretty crazy, right? We live in a world where you can't even believe what's on the website. And it's especially frustrating when it's something very difficult to verify, because even if you were to say, do a range test by riding a bike with a specific battery pack, there are so many other variables that go into determining what the range of a bike is, how heavy the rider is, what temperature is, what kind of elevation changes. So many different things that go into the range of a specific e-bike. But at least if I do get that measurement tool, you will get the true watt-hour capacity of a battery pack, which has the most influence on what the range of an e-bike will be. Leave a comment below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this topic. Let me know what you think of this battery specification nonsense. That's it for today, folks. Until next time.